I married the woman I saved from a brutal attack. But 2 years later, I found her in the arms of 3 strangers, laughing like I never existed. That night didn't just end our marriage. It changed everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and who I really was. Hey everyone, really appreciate you being here today. I've got something personal to share, something that stayed with me for years. So let's get into it. Back in the summer of 2007, I met this woman named Jenna Brooks in downtown Denver, not far from the buzz of the 16th Street Mall. It was right after a Colorado Rockies game. They just wrapped up a clean sweep against the Giants. I remember that day like it was yesterday. The air was warm, the streets were alive, and the whole city seemed to pulse with excitement. We were both 26 at the time. Jenna had this kind of magnetic presence. The sort of person who didn't just walk into a room, she arrived. She stood about 5 feet 10 inches, with this flowing light brown hair that reached down to her mid-back, and these incredibly sharp green eyes that you couldn't forget once you saw them. She moved with this natural ease, athletic build, trim waist, and just a certain grace that made people stop and look. She was, quite frankly, breathtaking. That day she'd been drinking heavily. Everywhere she went, guys were handing her drinks, starting at the game and continuing into the night at a bar just across from Coors Field. She kicked things off with Bloody Marys and eventually switched to Jack and Coors. By the time the sun dipped below the skyline, it was clear the alcohol had taken its toll. Her balance was off, and her steps had turned into a sort of unsteady sway. A lot of the guys at the bar saw her as an opportunity, a beautiful, carefree woman whose guard was clearly down. I could see it in their eyes. They weren't just admiring her, they were scheming. While she'd spent her day bouncing between drinks, I had spent mine a bit differently. I was out near the stadium, sharing the gospel with passers-by, handing out pamphlets, talking with folks, especially those living on the streets. Just doing what I felt called to do. By around 10 p.m. I was ready to head home. I was walking back toward my car in a lot not far from the bar when I noticed something that stopped me cold. Just a row over, there was some kind of altercation going on. 4 guys had a woman surrounded. She looked barely conscious and clearly couldn't stand on her own. It was obvious she wasn't in control of what was happening. She was trying to push them off, weakly but trying. One of them hit her hard, more than once, and growled at her to stop resisting. "It'll go easier for you if you just stop fighting," he muttered. And just like that, every bit of calm I had vanished. In the trunk of my car, I kept a 4-foot metal pipe, the kind I usually use to prop up my signs while preaching. I popped open the trunk, yanked out the pipe without a second thought, and charged straight at them. The first guy didn't even have a chance to react. My swing caught him right on the shoulder and I felt the bone give way under the blow. He hit the ground, screaming as chaos erupted around him. Before the others could even process what was happening, I was already on the second one. One well-placed strike dropped him instantly. His body went limp before he even hit the pavement. The third man tried to defend himself, raising an arm in panic. I swung hard. His forearm snapped with a sickening crack, and his elbow bent in a way it shouldn't have. He screamed in agony, stumbled backward, then turned and ran like his life depended on it. But the last guy, he was the worst of them. Realizing things were turning against him, he grabbed Jenna and yanked her in front of him like a human shield. He pulled out a knife, small but sharp, and pressed it to her neck. She froze, her whole body trembling. Our eyes locked for a second. Hers were wide, terrified. Her face was a mess, bruises blooming across her cheek, her lips split down the middle, blood slowly seeping from one nostril. She looked broken, but alive. I lifted the pipe again, slow and deliberate, and said one word, "Drop." To my surprise, she did. Without hesitation, Jenna collapsed to the ground, giving me the split-second opening I needed. I swung once more and the last man fell where he stood. Just like that, it was over. Jenna was lying there, clutching her neck. Blood was seeping from a shallow wound just beneath her jawline, not deep enough to be fatal, but enough to send her into full-blown panic. I dropped to my knees beside her and grabbed her by the shoulders, steady but gentle. "You're gonna be all right," I told her, trying to hold her gaze. "You're safe now. I promise." Something in my voice must have gotten through because her breathing started to slow, her shoulders stopped shaking. For the first time since I saw her, she looked like she believed she might live through this. Then came the sirens. A squad car screeched to a halt just yards away. Before I could get a single word out, the officers were on me. Guns drawn. Orders barked. One of them kicked the pipe from my hand, another shoved me face first into the pavement. I felt knees jam into my back, elbows grind into my neck, hands wrenching my arms behind me. I couldn't breathe. It was like being buried alive under the weight of 3 men. Eventually they realized I wasn't fighting back. They cuffed me, pulled me to my feet, and dragged me away without another word. As they hauled me toward the cruiser, I turned my head, trying to catch one last glimpse of Jenna. But she was already being tended to, fading into the blur of red and blue lights. I didn't see her again for days. They kept me in interrogation for nearly 20 hours. 2 men were dead. The other 2 were in critical condition. And a woman, battered, barely conscious, had been pulled from what could only be described as an attempted assault. The detectives had a lot of questions, and I had to wait while they sorted through the mess. What worked in my favor was pretty simple. I was sober, fully dressed. My fly wasn't down. My shirt was still tucked in. Meanwhile, all 4 attackers had been drinking heavily. They were either half-dressed or completely exposed when the police arrived. And Jenna, her blood alcohol level was nearly 3 times the legal limit. Eventually, the truth started to rise through all the confusion. Turns out, in the eyes of the public, and eventually the law, I was seen as the good guy. Jenna was recognized as the victim. And those 4 men? They were caught in the act of something cruel and horrifying. The local news stations ran wild with it. Headlines like "Street Preacher Turns Hero," "2 Dead, 2 Injured in Brutal Rescue," plastered every screen. Another read, "Knight in Shining Armor Saves Woman in Bar Lot Horror." It was surreal seeing my face on TV and being talked about like some kind of legend. The district attorney in Denver PD even held a press conference to clear up any whispers floating around. They stressed that this wasn't about race. Everyone involved was white. No criminal charges were brought against me. The investigation showed clearly that I'd acted to stop an assault. The 2 men who survived the beating were both hit with serious charges, multiple counts of assault and attempted sexual battery. Oddly though, Jenna wasn't let off entirely. She ended up facing a few minor charges herself: public intoxication, disturbing the peace, and even disorderly conduct. That part never sat right with me. I couldn't understand how someone who had barely escaped something that traumatic was still penalized. But then again, I've never really figured out how police departments make half their decisions. A few days later, I got a call from Channel 7, one of the local news networks. They asked if I'd be willing to do a sit-down interview, said folks wanted to hear the full story from my perspective. I agreed, not expecting much. But when I walked into the studio, I was caught off guard. There she was, Jenna, sitting right across from me under the glare of studio lights. Turned out the station had pulled off a media stunt. They'd scored an exclusive joint interview, the woman who'd been attacked and the man who had stopped it. It was clear they were going for ratings gold. We were both still carrying the physical aftermath of that night. My face was swollen and bruised, scabs crusting over cuts along my cheek and brow. But Jenna looked like she'd been through a war. Her eyes were so puffy she could barely open them. Deep purple bruises painted her cheeks and forehead, and a clean white bandage was taped across the side of her neck, covering the knife wound. I can't even imagine how we looked on camera, 2 broken people barely holding it together, trying to put words to a nightmare that hadn't fully settled yet. During the interview, Jenna spoke first. Her voice was shaky, and it cracked as she tried to explain what happened that night. "I just lost control," she admitted. "I'm a huge Rockies fan, always have been. When they won the series, I just got carried away." She looked down for a moment, then added, "I don't usually drink like that. But that day, it felt like everyone was celebrating. Everyone kept handing me drinks and I didn't want to say no." Then she described the part she could remember, how those men had coaxed her outside the bar, how their hands were on her before she realized what was happening. "They were pulling at my clothes," she said, voice trembling. "I started to fight back. I tried to scream. I remember seeing him, Ben, standing there like some kind of force of nature," Jenna said during the interview, her voice breaking again. "He had this wild, almost haunted look in his eyes, and he was holding a pipe above his head. One of those men? He had a knife pressed to my throat." She paused, wiped a tear from her cheek, and continued. "Ben looked me in the eye and told me to drop. So I did. I dropped straight to the ground. The blade still cut me, not deeply, thank God, but as I fell, I managed to shove his arm just enough to redirect the knife. If I hadn't, I honestly don't know if I'd be standing here right now." After she spoke, the interviewer turned her attention to me, eyebrows raised, tone clipped. "What were you doing in that area so late at night? Were you drinking too?" I shook my head, calm and clear. "No, I was out preaching," I told her. "Spreading the word. Talking to anyone willing to listen. Trying to reach the lost." The interviewer barely tried to hide her doubt. She smirked as she moved quickly to her next question, rushing through my answers like I was some kind of sideshow. just another odd story in her segment. It was obvious she wasn't really interested in my side of what happened. While I was talking, I noticed Jenna turning away, quietly crying again, shoulders trembling just slightly under the studio lights. That image stuck with me. Once the camera stopped rolling, all I wanted was to leave. I needed to get away from the chaos, the attention, the way people were suddenly treating me like I was either a savior or a criminal. As I stepped out into the studio parking lot, I thought I'd made a clean break. But Jenna came after me. She called out my name and asked me to wait. She said she needed to talk, to thank me properly. She didn't want me to just vanish without hearing how much what I'd done had meant to her. I've always been open to conversations. As an itinerant preacher, connecting with people is part of the calling. So I agreed. We found a little diner not far from the studio and sat down to share a meal. That's when I began to learn who she really was. Jenna wasn't just another party girl from downtown. Her father was one of Colorado's richest men, a giant in the tech world, a leader in innovation, someone who had his hands in every major deal from Denver to Boulder. The Brooks family lived in Greenwood Village, owned box seats for all of Denver's sports teams, and had influence in more circles than I could imagine. They were huge sports lovers, especially Jenna. Me. I had none of that. No wealth. No pedigree. No connections. Everything I owned, I carried with me, and everything I had went into my street ministry. Before that, I'd spent years in uniform, 2 tours in Iraq, 1 in Afghanistan. I'd seen what war does to people. I'd watched life drain from faces. I'd taken lives myself. I wasn't proud of it. I wasn't the same man I used to be. That night outside Coors Field, I never wanted to swing that pipe. I never wanted to see that look on a dying man's face again. I had been trying to walk away from violence, trying to follow a different path. A path of peace, of compassion, of understanding. A path that didn't leave bodies in its wake. But sometimes the path chooses you, not the other way around. And even though I stopped something terrible from happening, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been pulled back into a life I was trying so hard to leave behind. I wanted redemption. Or at the very least, I wanted to make peace with the parts of myself I hadn't forgiven yet. I've always tried to help people see that there's a better way, a different road than the one so many of us seem to be slipping down without even realizing it. That's what my ministry was all about. And yet, on that night, the night Jenna was beaten and nearly taken, I lost hold of my own ideals. I slipped too. I remember thinking, oh, what a wretched man I am. That old passage came rushing back. The very thing I hate, I do. The good I want to do, I don't. I'd always believed that violence was something to be avoided, a failure of spirit. I used to tell people, violence is the first refuge of the coward, and the final act of the brave. But in that moment I didn't feel brave. I just felt like I had no other choice. Stopping that assault, it wasn't about heroism. It was about duty. About standing in the way of evil when no one else would. There were 4 of them. That meant 4 lives twisted by hate or desire or God knows what, and only one of me. The odds were terrible. But I was trained for moments like that. The reflexes, the calculation, even the capacity for violence, they were all buried deep in me from my time overseas. When the moment came, that part of me woke up. I stand about 6 feet 4 inches and weigh 220 pounds. People have told me I have an intimidating presence. Broad shoulders, narrow hips, flat stomach, strong build. Sandy blonde hair, hazel eyes, clear skin. I've heard folks call me good-looking before, though I don't put too much stock in that. Still, Jenna had mentioned it more than once. Just saying. After the interview, she told me something unexpected. Her father wanted to meet me. She asked if I'd come with her to their home so he could thank me in person. I offered to follow her there instead. No pressure, I said. I'll just follow behind in my car. We were still standing in the parking lot of the television station when we made those plans. 20 minutes later, I was pulling up behind her into what could only be described as a mansion. It had a wide, circular driveway, gardens you could get lost in, and more windows than I could count. Inside there were rooms for everything. A massive dining room, sitting areas, a full library, a dozen bedrooms, probably more. It was the kind of place you'd expect to see on the cover of a luxury home magazine. I didn't know what to expect walking into a house like that. But what I didn't expect was to find her parents in the kitchen, side by side, preparing lunch. Jenna must have called ahead because they were already expecting us. There was no staff, no chefs, just 2 very wealthy people chopping vegetables and setting the table together like it was the most natural thing in the world. When Jenna introduced me, "This is Ben Wilson, the man who saved my life," her parents stepped forward with warmth that surprised me. They thanked me not with fanfare or showmanship, but with genuine kindness. Then they invited me to sit and eat with them. Lunch was simple but fresh: tuna salad, sliced vegetables, radishes, green onions, tomatoes, celery, baby carrots, all served with hearty 12-grain bread. They even poured us glasses of ice-cold milk. I hadn't eaten much that day, and I must have been hungrier than I realized. I went through 4 sandwiches, one after the other. They just smiled and watched me eat like I was part of the family already. As I ate, I noticed something I couldn't quite ignore: the quiet glances passing between Jenna and her father. They weren't obvious, but they said a lot. A tilt of the head, a raised brow, a subtle nod, like there was a conversation going on that didn't need words. And sitting there watching it unfold, I couldn't help but feel like I'd stepped into something much bigger than me. After a few minutes, Jenna excused herself to use the restroom. A moment later, her father followed suit. No explanation, just a quiet exit. I figured in a house that size they weren't bumping into each other on the way. That left me alone at the table with her mother. The silence that followed was heavy, not tense exactly, but awkward in that polite kind of way where you both know there's not much to say. We passed time with small talk. She asked about my ministry, I asked about the house. 20 minutes went by like that, just enough to make me wonder how long I was supposed to stay. When Jenna and her father finally returned, they came back together, calm, composed, like something had been settled while they were away. I took it as my cue to leave. I stood up and offered a friendly smile. "Well, it was really nice meeting you all. I don't want to take up more of your day. Thanks again for lunch. Jenna, I hope those bruises heal up quickly. You'll see soon enough, you're still just as beautiful as ever." Before I could take a step, her father raised his hand slightly. "Hold on there, son," he said. "I asked Jenna to bring you here for a reason. Thought it might be good for us to have a conversation, just you and me." I hesitated for a moment, unsure what he was leading to. "Sure. What did you want to talk about, sir?" He chuckled, gave me a friendly pat on the back. "Why don't we head into my den? Come sit for a spell." I shrugged and followed him down the hall into a richly furnished study. Everything about it was polished: dark wood, deep bookshelves, heavy curtains. He motioned for me to sit in a wide leather armchair across from his own. A low coffee table separated us. Then he leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, and looked me right in the eye. "Tell me, Ben," he said. "What exactly are you doing with your life?" I sat up a bit straighter. "I'm a street preacher, Mr. Brooks," I answered honestly. "I travel, I speak to people. Try to share hope where there isn't much of it. And about that night. Defending your daughter wasn't about who she was. I didn't know her. I just saw someone in trouble. It could have been anyone. I'd have done the same." He nodded slowly, considering that. "I get that. I do. But the fact is, it was my daughter. Not just anyone. And that makes it personal to me." He leaned back, arms crossed now. "I want to do something for you. Something real. You saved her life. That kind of courage, it matters. And beyond that, she thinks you're too good looking to just let vanish. She wants me to find a way to keep you close, keep you around." I smiled politely but shook my head gently. "Mr. Brooks," I started. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Brooks, truly," I said, trying to keep my voice respectful but firm. "But I've already got work. My ministry keeps me busy, and I'm in the middle of applying for a small mission grant right now. You don't owe me anything. I was just in the right place at the right time." I glanced toward the door, trying to subtly excuse myself. "And as for your daughter, she's a beautiful woman, no doubt. But every man who meets her seems to want something from her. I don't need that kind of drama in my life. I'm not looking for complications." He didn't react with offense, just looked at me with a kind of patience I didn't expect. "She's not as wild as she seems," he said, voice steady. "That's just the act she puts on, the role men expect her to play. But truth is, Jenna's pretty gentle at heart. She loves being home just as much as she loves a night out. You know why she's into sports? Not to impress anyone. She was an athlete herself, varsity in high school and college. The guys who hover around her think she's some sort of groupie, but she isn't. That night, she just dropped her guard. And the wolves were ready." He let that sink in for a moment, then studied me closely. "Ben, let me ask you something. You ever made a mistake? Ever found yourself in a moment where things moved too fast, and you reacted in a way you wish you hadn't? Ever looked back and thought, that's not who I am?" I frowned a bit, unsure where this was going. "I've made my share of bad calls. We all have. So what I'm saying is this: maybe she wants to spend some time with you. Get to know you. That's all." He paused. "You saved her life. And you're the only man, outside of me, who's never tried to take something from her. That means something to her. It's rare. She respects that. And it's eating her up, the idea of you walking away before she's had a chance to see who you really are. I didn't have much to say to that. I wasn't expecting to hear any of it. But it stuck with me. Jenna and I started seeing each other not long after that conversation. I didn't stop preaching, that part of my life stayed the same. She didn't always agree with what I believed or how I delivered my messages. But she admired my conviction. Said it was rare to meet someone who actually lived by their principles. She liked the way I carried myself. She liked the strength behind my gentleness. 6 months later we got married. And I'll admit it, I was starting to fall for her. Slowly, cautiously. But it was happening. For a while things were good. Really good. She wasn't a heavy drinker, and just like her father said, she was much softer at home than the image she projected in public. We spent time gardening together. She'd cook. We'd talk, laugh, try to figure out what love was supposed to look like between two people from such different worlds. There were quiet afternoons, slow evenings. Mornings where we didn't need words, just each other. It felt like maybe we were building something real. Jenna never missed a home game. Whether it was basketball, football, baseball, she was always in those luxury box seats her family owned front and center. I never went with her. Not once. While she was cheering from her suite, I was out on the streets, watching over the lost, trying to guide those who were hurting toward something higher. We didn't share much, to be honest. Our lives ran in parallel, not together. I spent most evenings preaching, walking the sidewalks, talking with whoever would stop to listen. She stayed home. Or at the stadium. Or at her parents' place. People supported my ministry through small donations, so I had some income, but the truth is, most of our financial stability came from her parents. I was honest about that from the beginning. I told her plainly, I'm not a provider in the traditional sense. I preach to the poor, I live among them, speak for them, carry what I can. I couldn't give her the world and material things. She said she understood. Said she was glad to be part of a divine mission. She claimed it gave her life purpose. I believed her. But the truth was, her parents still kept a tight grip on her life. They funded her needs, gave her everything she wanted, and in return she stayed within reach. They always had a say. Always had influence. I gave her what I had, all of me that was left after the ministry. And she gave me what remained after her devotion to her teams, her lifestyle, and her family. That was just how our relationship worked. I accepted it. Or tried to. As beautiful as she was, there was always something distant in her. Especially in private. No matter how much care or patience I brought to our moments together, something was missing, something that couldn't be faked. In public, she sparkled. She turned heads wherever we went. But behind closed doors, it felt like she'd drift away. I'd reach for her and she'd be there, but never all the way. She liked affection, on her terms. She'd flirt, laugh, touch me in passing, but never opened up in that deeper way. Not emotionally. Not physically. It wasn't rejection, but it wasn't true intimacy either. She never outright refused closeness. But she never truly offered herself, not fully. And that was where the unraveling began. We were married but not connected. Close in proximity but miles apart in spirit. She had her sports seasons. I had my ministry schedule. And that unspoken distance just became the rhythm of our life. By our 2nd year of marriage, I had fully committed to my preaching schedule. Most nights, I was out from 6 in the evening to midnight. It wasn't about chasing donations. It was about reaching people, those who'd fallen through the cracks, those no one else saw. I remember one Monday night in particular, a big game for the Broncos. The whole city seemed to buzz with energy. Every bar downtown was packed, especially along the western stretch of the 16th Street Mall. I decided that night to move my outreach there, figured the crowd would be heavier, maybe someone needed a word of hope in all that noise. That was my usual pattern. When the Nuggets or Avalanche played, I'd set up near the arena, the old Pepsi Center. If it was a Rockies game, I'd be by Coors Field. And when the Broncos took the field, that night I made my way toward the west side of downtown. The Broncos had just won a big game, it was all over the news. The streets were electric, full of celebration. Fans poured out of the bars, shouting, laughing, high on victory and beer. I wasn't there for the game, obviously. I was there for the people. The ones who needed something more than just another night of noise. But as I stood near the edge of the crowd, handing out tracts and offering quiet words to those who'd listen, I saw something that stopped me cold. Jenna. Jenna Brooks, now Jenna Wilson, my wife of 2 years, came stumbling out of one of the bars. She could barely keep her balance in those tall heels, her body swaying with each step. Her hair was a sweaty, tangled mess. Her skirt was so short it rode up with every movement, and her bra strap had slipped down, hanging off her arm. Her makeup was smeared like she'd been crying, or kissing. Maybe both. Her whole body glistened with sweat, and the smell of alcohol hit me before she even got close. She was laughing wildly, clinging to every man around her, kissing their cheeks, their lips, letting their hands roam across her back, her waist, her thighs. She wasn't pulling away. She wasn't protesting. She wasn't drunk and helpless. She was loving it. And in that moment, something in me broke. Not in anger, not in rage, but in a quiet, devastating kind of clarity. This wasn't some misunderstanding. This wasn't a woman who had gotten too tipsy and made a mistake. This was who she was. And I realized then, I could never be what she wanted. No sermon, no prayer, no love I offered could fill the hunger she had for being desired by everyone all the time. One man would never be enough for her. Not when the world was full of attention and flattery. She didn't need me. She didn't even see me. I went home that night, well, what we had called home, and packed 3 suitcases. That's all I had and all I needed. I didn't confront her. Didn't scream. Didn't plead. I just got the message finally and walked away with quiet dignity. She wasn't worth my fury. I'd already given her my best. And now I had nothing left to say. I found a cot at the mission downtown. Kept preaching. Threw myself even deeper into the work. My purpose, my calling. I didn't file for divorce. I didn't hear from Jenna. Or her family. And that was fine. What would we even say to each other at that point? Nearly a year and a half passed. Then one night near Ball Arena, what used to be the Pepsi Center, I saw her again. She was out dancing with a crowd, drink in hand, spinning under the city lights. Still beautiful. Still magnetic. Still surrounded by men. She hadn't changed. Not a bit. That same need for attention, that drive to be the object of everyone's desire, it was still her addiction. Maybe her only true love. And you know what? It's okay, Jenna. I still pray for you. I've learned not to hold on to bitterness when someone breaks your heart. I've made my own mistakes too. No one gets through life clean. So I forgive her, not for her sake but for mine. 2 more years passed. No word from the Brooks family. Nothing from Jenna. But then, out of nowhere, a donation came through. A big one. Could have funded months of outreach. It had no name attached, just a note. Keep doing what you're doing. Maybe someone rich crossed my path again. It wouldn't be the first time someone touched by the ministry gave without wanting recognition. I didn't question it. I didn't go looking for answers. I just thanked God, quietly and sincerely, and went on doing what I was called to do. Still, something about it lingered in my mind, not the money but the how. Whoever sent it, how did they know where to deposit it? I hadn't exactly broadcast my bank information. I asked around at the Denver Rescue Mission, thinking maybe someone there had mentioned something or passed along my details. But no one had a clue. I even inquired at the bank, asked if they could trace the source of the deposits, but they either didn't know or weren't allowed to tell me. So I let it be. I used the money to help others, food, clothing, shelter, only keeping what I needed to cover my basic needs. It didn't change my life. I still ate when I was hungry, slept when I was tired. The only difference was the mystery humming in the background. Then one quiet Thursday afternoon came a knock at my door. I opened it to find a man in a brown suit, holding a light manila envelope. His hair was neat, his demeanor professional. "Mr. William Jefferson Wilson?" he asked. "That's me," I said. "I represent the law firm of McQueary and Peters. Our clients were Mr. Hughes O'Neill and his wife, Catherine. I'm here regarding their estate and a matter concerning other possible heirs." My heart stuttered. "Estate?" "Yes, sir," he replied smoothly. Mr. O'Neill was the president and CEO of O'Neill Industries. Mrs. O'Neill served as vice president and director. According to the documents in my possession, you, Mr. Wilson, were appointed as the executor of their estate. I blinked. My brain couldn't catch up. What? "You were named the executor of the O'Neill estate," he said again. "The documents were signed 2.5 years ago when they updated their will." I just stood there stunned. That would have been while Jenna and I were still married, before everything fell apart. "But their daughter and I, we're not together anymore," I said. "Maybe there's been a mistake." He held out the envelope. "You can read the documents for yourself. Mr. Wilson, we'd like you to come into our offices tomorrow morning at 8:30 a.m. Our team will walk you through everything. We've been appointed as counsel for the estate, but we'll need your consent to proceed. There's quite a bit to handle and we'll assist you with every detail." I exhaled slowly. My voice came out quieter than I expected. I guess I can come. Where's your office?" "Quentin Peters," he replied, handing me a business card. "And no need to drive. We'll send a car for you. It'll arrive at 8:10 sharp. From this point forward, a car and driver will be at your disposal. I nodded, still dazed. Maybe Hughes had seen a checkbook lying around. Maybe he had quietly tracked my account all those years and used it to support my ministry without ever saying a word. Whatever the case, he never asked for credit. Never made it about himself. Just gave quietly and consistently. The next morning, at exactly 8:05 a.m., I stepped out of the Denver rescue mission, just like I had nearly every morning for years. But this morning was different. Parked right in front of the entrance, illegally I might add, was a long, sleek black stretch limousine. The engine purred quietly. A chauffeur in a dark uniform stood by the rear door, one hand on the handle, the other gesturing toward me to enter. I froze for a second. I could feel the eyes of the street on me, dozens, maybe hundreds of the same men and women I'd ministered to, prayed with, shared meals with. Some of them squinted in confusion, others whispered to one another. To them, it must have looked like I was stepping into another world entirely. Truth is, that's exactly what it felt like. I climbed into the back of the limo, unsure what to expect. Inside, the air was cool and quiet, the seats plush, the scent clean and unfamiliar. Sitting across from me was a young woman, sharp, composed, dressed in a slate gray business suit. "Good morning, Mr. Wilson," she said, extending a folder. "My name is Gabriella. I'll be acting as your personal assistant moving forward." "Personal assistant?" I repeated, the word strange in my mouth. She nodded. "Yes, sir. Once we arrive at McQuarrie and Peters, you'll be briefed on your options. My role is to ensure everything runs smoothly, scheduling, correspondence, transportation, and any day-to-day logistics you may need." Before I could ask another question, the limo pulled up to a striking modern building at the corner of Colorado Boulevard and Mexico Street. It stood like a monument of glass and steel, polished and towering, a far cry from the street corners I was used to preaching on. The door opened. Quentin Peters, the man from yesterday, stood waiting on the sidewalk, offering a firm handshake. "Welcome, Mr. Wilson. Please come inside." He led me into a spacious conference room with high ceilings and a long, gleaming table. The room was already full, senior board members, legal staff, executives I didn't recognize. But one face stopped me cold. Jenna. She was seated at the far end of the table, dressed in a fitted black blouse, her hair neatly pinned, makeup light but deliberate. Her expression was unreadable. As I entered, she stood briefly, her eyes meeting mine before flickering away again. Then she sat back down in silence. Quentin cleared his throat and gestured toward the seat at the head of the table. "Shall we begin?" I sat down slowly, still trying to catch up. Quentin began flipping through the papers in front of him. "Mr. Wilson, as the executor of the O'Neill estate, you now hold a significant responsibility. There is a great deal to review." And so it began. The reading of the will felt like it lasted hours. Every clause read out loud, every condition explained in painstaking detail. The room stayed silent, the atmosphere heavy with legal language and unspoken tension. The senior officers of O'Neill Industries listened carefully, some stone-faced, others visibly uneasy. Then came a pause. Quentin looked up and slid a smaller, sealed envelope across the table toward me. "This isn't part of the formal estate documents," he said, voice a little softer. "It's personal. But it'll have to wait. There are urgent business matters we need to address first." Without a word, I passed the envelope to Gabriella to hold. The next few hours were a blur. I signed documents to officially accept my position as executor. More forms followed. Temporary control over company assets, legal authority over corporate accounts, appointment of general counsel, tax documents, all of it. I just kept signing. Not because I wanted the power, but because I felt like I owed something to the family who had once welcomed me in, despite everything that followed. And yet, deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something even bigger was still coming. Thanks for listening. This story isn't over yet. Things are about to get even more complicated.